Good morning, everybody. We're live from the birdhouse. It is rolling into the end of May. We're rolling into the last week of May. It is already the 24th somehow. So today we're showing you some of the different feeders and houses that have been popular this season and what makes them different from one another. We get those questions a lot. It's not uncommon. People come here and they look at the selection we have and they get a little overwhelmed and aren't sure what's the difference between one or the other. So I thought I'd show off some new products we have this year as well that you might not have seen in previous years. As always, we like to know who is on. If you're on, you can absolutely say hi in the comments. We always love to know what kind of things you're seeing, so you can put your sightings in there. And of course, if you have any questions, you can absolutely put those in there as well. It was pretty neat on the Saturday's broadcast when we were talking about sightings, how a few of us all had the Tennessee warblers popping up in their yard. And as we've been going on the past couple of days, we've heard more feedback from people that a lot of people have been hearing Tennessee warblers in their backyards. So if you don't have that Merlin app, I highly, highly suggest it, because you never know what kind of things you might still have singing in your backyard. And why don't we look at the migration while we are at it? Now is a good time. We're still in migration season. There's still birds flowing into the area, so might not be as in big of a quantity as we'd seen in the past, but there's definitely some migration activity going on through the area. So absolutely keep those feeders out and your bird baths out with that moving water feature. Keep your hummingbird feeders nice and full because they're still flowing in to the area. So just not in the numbers we saw earlier in the season. So even last week we were looking at around 300 million birds flowing into the continental U.S. So that number isn't going to be as strong. Now it's at a mere 155 million predicted flowing in tonight into tomorrow, but that's still quite a bit of bird activity. And you can see as the color gets brighter, as it gets more orange and yellow and even white, that's where the migration activity is the strongest. So it's going to be really strong up in Minnesota, Maine, seeing some good migration, but we're still in an area where it's medium to low migration. So this is the estimated migration going from tonight, this evening, into tomorrow. And then over the next couple of days, looks about the same. So there's still some migration activity happening, and there's still birds here singing and singing. Been hearing lots of yellow warbler out there, lots of Oriole activity. The Orioles are definitely starting. We've heard reports of them carrying nesting material and weaving some nests together. So Oriole activity has been pretty good. Thought I'd give you an update as well about the avian flu. These were the stats from Saturday when we talked last. But as far as wild birds go, the number has not changed. So we've been keeping a really close eye on that because we've been getting so many questions about the avian flu. But this wild bird number hasn't changed. So there haven't been any reported cases of songbirds affected by this strain of the flu in the whole continental US. So you are still fine to keep your feeders out and to feed those birds, absolutely fine. The only number that is going up is this domestic poultry number. That's over 38 million right now. But as far as wild birds go, you're still fine to do your backyard birding as normal. The birds being affected by it are, again, waterfowl and some birds of prey. So we are still in the clear here for our backyard bird feeding. And as far as backyard activity goes, we talk about all kinds of different houses for for birds and for bats and for bees, including mason bees. And so I snapped this photo of my mason bee house. This is from just yesterday because there is still some pretty good mason bee activity going on. I still see them coming and going quite frequently from the house in my backyard. So it started off completely empty. They all tunneled out and they were all pollinating the garden. And now it seems like every day I see more and more of these little holes filled. So If you don't have your mason bee house out yet, we're getting towards the end of the season. So now is definitely when you want to put them up in hopes that you might get some mason bees starting to use it. So what I really like about this style too is this little insert in here. You can actually remove that whole insert. So this is really nice if you ever want to clean it out. You can just pull the whole thing out, and we sell replacement inserts. You could just put a brand new one in if you wanted. So this was a newer product for us over the past couple of years, and I just switched over to this style, and I've really been enjoying it. So that's a really good house that I've had good luck with. So as far as houses go, you guys have been reporting lots of nesting activity, and including bluebird activity. So quite a few of you have reported eggs in the houses, and now the eggs are starting to hatch. And I thought I'd show you some of the differences between some different birdhouses, because we get that question a lot. Not all birdhouses are created the same. They all do have different features, and some of them are pretty elaborate. Some of them are very simple, but you can attract birds with either. So I thought I'd show you this model. This is called the Ultimate Bluebird House. And the reason I like showing this one off is because it has every little kind of bell and whistle you could ever want in a birdhouse. And it is a bluebird house. And the thing that makes it a bluebird house is going to be the opening of the hole. So this diameter of the entrance hole, it needs to be 1.5 inches wide, and that's large enough for the bluebirds to fit in. And you'll see that there is a metal covering over it, and that's to keep woodpeckers or squirrels or even house sparrows on the smaller houses with the smaller opening from making that opening bigger. And if you do have a house that something's making that opening bigger, you can get just the metal plate to make it smaller. So with bluebird houses, sparrows can absolutely fit in there. As the hole size gets smaller and smaller, you're really just limiting the number of species that can use it. So it also has a little predator guard. So sometimes this metal plate will help as a predator guard to keep some of the larger predators out, but so will this. So this, if you look at the entrance, there's not a perch, and perches, a lot of houses don't have perches on them anymore. And the reason for that is animals like squirrels or raccoons, they can sometimes grab onto that perch, and it gives them a little bit of leverage to reach inside the house and grab the eggs or grab the nestlings. So by not having a perch on it, that can help keep predators at bay. And then this entrance, this is a little predator guard here too, technically. So this is just a little extra piece of wood that causes the entrance to stick out. We do have tunnels, some larger tunnels you can screw on to a house to make this entrance longer as well. That'll do the same thing. And just having it protrude this much will make it so raccoons and squirrels can't reach in and angle their arm down to raid the nest of any eggs or any nestlings or anything like that, which can happen this time of the year. And it also has a very fancy, if you open up one side of it, there is plexiglass. So you can see right there, this is a little viewing window. And that is so you can open up the house and you can see inside it to see if there's been any nesting activity, if the nest has been built, if eggs have been laid, if there's young inside there. So you can look inside without disturbing any of the young. But then most importantly, it also has a side that opens up to clean. So you can easily clean out that nest once the young have fledged. So once the young have left the house, you can clean that nest out. It can be kind of hard to tell when they leave and when they start building another nest. Some birds go right from one into another. So it can be hard to tell when that is, but if you're able to tell when the young have actually left the house, you can then go inside and clean that nest out. So some birds will have 2-3 broods a year, just like the bluebirds do. So that window can be kind of narrow, but you can absolutely clean that nest out and the birds will build a new nest. They will sometimes reuse nests. The issue with when they reuse nests is that sometimes they can get moldy, or you can get some kind of parasites in there that aren't so great for the birds. This also has a nest lift, this little contraption here. And this will just keep the nest elevated to help with airflow, to kind of avoid some of that, the mold getting in there. And then finally, it has a grid that goes from the nesting cavity up to the exit hole. And the idea with that is that it helps give the nestlings some grip when they're leaving the house, to help help them climb out. So this really has everything you could ever want in a birdhouse. So that is why it's called the ultimate bluebird house. But really the most important thing when you are picking out a birdhouse is to make sure it has some way of cleaning it out. Some of them are super simple, and there's just a little door that swings open. Some of them you have to unscrew, but making sure there's a clean out is absolutely important for your birdhouses. So most birds do like their house stationary as well. So they like it on a pole is kind of ideal. That way, if you have issues with predators trying to climb up the pole, you can put a baffle on it. But some birds don't mind a house that swings around in the wind. So if you're looking to mount a house, we do have poles and hardware and all that kind of stuff to mount it somewhere stationary, because not all birds do like a house that swings around. So this is a very simple one. If you're trying to attract nesting birds, this is the easiest thing you can do to put out. Just a little house that swings around in the wind. You can hang this on a tree is ideal. You can put it on a shepherd's hook that might be by some kind of cover. This is a wren house, and sometimes depending on the size of the hole, if it's big enough, which this one looks like it is, chickadees can fit inside this too. So wrens and chickadees will use this, and they don't mind a house that it kind of swings around in the wind a little bit. And what makes it a wren house or a chickadee house is, again, the opening of the hole. So this hole size is going to be about 1 1/8 inch in diameter, so they can squeak inside. But then larger birds, like a bluebird, for example, or a sparrow, they can't fit in there. It's just too small for them. So wrens are pretty interesting. They will nest in all kinds of fun places. Right now is the time of the year where we get phone calls of some of these interesting places that wrens will nest. Some really fun ones that we've heard over time have been the mailbox where people get their newspaper delivered. That I've heard a few times. If you leave your garage door open too long, sometimes they'll start nesting in the garage. I've heard them nesting, of course, on wreaths. If you have a wreath left out from the holidays, or if you have a spring wreath on your door, don't be surprised if you get a wren or a robin nesting on top of that. Flower baskets are another common one that they'll nest in if you have hanging baskets. And then some other good ones have been shoes left overnight in the garden, and even somebody who left their clothes out on a clothesline. We had a customer who had wrens nesting in the pocket of one of their shirts that were on the clothesline. So some really fun and interesting places that wrens will nest. This house here also doesn't have a perch, but you can kind of see there's some grooves that are carved out there in the front. And the reason for that is the birds can cling right on to the house there to easily go inside and out. So you might know that wrens are around by their song. They certainly love to sing and sing. And then also, if you open up your nest box and you see that there's a little layer of sticks, that is mostly going to be from a wren, most likely. What happens with wrens when they're nesting is the males will start the nest building process. So they'll start nest building in a few different places. Then they'll sing their song to attract a mate. When they do attract a mate, she'll go around with him to all the different locales, and she picks which one that she wants to continue the nest building process with. So if you're opening and cleaning your houses out and you see there was just a little layer of sticks and nothing else came of it, it's probably a wren that started the nest building process and then decided the mate decided that she wanted to nest elsewhere. So some fun stuff that happens in the yard this time of the year. So not everything will nest in birdhouses. Some of our common backyard birds, however, do. We talked about wrens, chickadees, sparrows. If you're lucky enough to have bluebirds, they will. Nuthatches are also a cavity nester that will nest in houses. Woodpeckers, And then some people also have good luck with attracting screech owls. So if you are trying to get a larger bird, like a bird of prey, screech owls will also use nesting boxes. They're larger, but they will use them. And then there's other ways to attract nesting birds as well, like these nesting balls. This has been getting lots of action in my backyard. Birds will grab this nesting material and either weave it into their nest, or they'll use some of this fluff to line their nest with so the eggs have a nice little soft layer. As we get later in the season, goldfinches will use a lot of material like this, natural cotton or plant fibers, to build their nest. They start nesting pretty late in the season, though. It's usually going to be around July for us that they start nesting. So as you get on in the season, you might start to see that the goldfinches are grabbing some more nesting material. They absolutely love this. And you definitely want to make sure to stay away from the dryer lint. I think I've talked about that a bit before. It's just not known if the chemicals that we use to clean our clothes, if it can harm the birds in any way. So just want to stay away from that. But you can absolutely use pet fur. If you've got a pet that sheds quite a bit, you can brush them and take that fur and even stuff it into, if you've got like an old suet basket that you're not using, that's a really good place to put nesting material. And you can find online, if you go on YouTube or anything like that, there's lots of videos of, especially tufted titmouse are quite bold, and they will just land on pets sometimes and pull the fur right out of them. So there's some really fun videos online showing that kind of behavior. So tufted titmouse especially love that pet fur for their nesting material. And it looks like a couple of people are on. Stephanie specifically has a question here about the nesting balls. And she says, do you hang the nesting balls in a tree? That's where I have mine. I've got mine in kind of a shrub. But yeah, you can hang them in a tree. You could even hang them with your feeders, I suppose, because just like a feeder where they come and grab some seed and leave, they do the same thing with the nesting balls. So they'll grab some nesting material and then be on their way. So it's a really fun thing to do this time of the year. And as far as feeders go, if you've ever been to the store, you know we have a lot. And I thought I'd show you one new one, and then a couple that are really popular, especially one especially that's popular right now this time of the year. But this is a newer model that just came out. When we talk about tube feeders and what kind of seed that they offer, they can offer different kinds of seed, but this is for a sunflower or sunflower seed mix. And you can tell because the holes are nice and big in it. We'll see a Niger Feeder coming up that has little tiny holes in it, but this is going to be for sunflower or any kind of sunflower mix. So something that has bigger pieces. And it has those nice big perches as well. So you can get cardinals. You can also get the small birds as well. And it has a little tray on it, which I like. So this is a new one from Joel Yankee. The base pops out, so it's super easy to clean. And then really the newest feature about the whole thing is the way that the top opens up. There's a little button on it, and the top will just open up super easily. So instead of having to pull the top up, this has just the little flip top. So something a little different. If you're looking for the newest type of feeder that's on the market, that's going to be this one here by Joel Yankee. So it's a really nice one. It's made in the US, and it has a lifetime warranty against squirrel damage, which is another good thing, because if you've ever put out a bird feeder, you might find that not only do you get birds, but you get squirrels. And is on here saying which squirrel-proof bird feeders you recommend. Well, it's funny you should ask, because I do have one right here. This is my favorite, and this line, the Squirrel Buster line, is our bestseller in the store. And the reason for that is they actually work, which is a good thing. Squirrel-proof feeders can be hit or miss. It is possible to squirrel-proof your setup, even if you don't have squirrel-proof feeders, as long as you can keep your feeders, several feet away from trees or from a deck. You can put them on a pole with a baffle to keep the squirrels from climbing up, as long as that baffle's up high enough and the squirrels can't launch themselves from something. You can squirrel-proof your setup, but sometimes it's easier to just put up a squirrel-proof feeder. And I love this Squirrel Buster Classic. We have another one that's larger called the Plus, which is also really good and holds more seed. But this I've had in my backyard now for several years, and I've never had a squirrel be able to use it, which is awesome. And with squirrel-proof feeders, the thing that makes them squirrel-proof is they're weight sensitive. So squirrels are heavy enough that they'll set this feeder off, but birds won't. So birds are so light, they're mostly feathers, their bones are hollow. So you can have several birds on this feeder just fine, but then when you get one squirrel on it, they'll set it off. And what does that mean? As soon as they get on the feeder, whether they launch themselves and they're grabbing onto the perch, or if they're climbing from the top down, no matter what it might be, it sets off a spring mechanism that is inside the feeder, so the squirrels can't destroy it. But when a squirrel gets on it, so you can see right here, there's the feeding port and the perch, so the birds can feed just fine, but a squirrel gets on it, and then this cage drops down, and that denies the squirrels from being able to feed. So it's really simple, but it's effective. Some other squirrel-proof feeders have the springs on the outside of the feeder, which we found the squirrels can just rip them off, and then it is no longer squirrel proof. So love this Squirrel Buster line. They really work, and it will keep the squirrels at bay, which is really nice. Another thing you can do is you can use safflower seed. Squirrels don't really like the safflower seed. We get we get good feedback about that because the blackbirds don't like it either. So if you have a lot of grackles, they're not going to eat the safflower seed. It can take some other birds a bit of time to get used to it, which is the drawback of it. But birds like cardinals and finches, they really do like that safflower seed. And as far as the seed can make a huge difference in what birds you get as well. So you want to make sure your seed blend has a lot of the foods the birds like. And our bestseller here at the store, at the birdhouse, is our chickadee blend. And it has lots of sunflower seed in it. It has peanuts. It has safflower. It has striped sunflower, and it has sunflower hearts, which are the insides of the sunflower. So there's really something for any kind of bird that's going to come to a seed feeder in this blend, it's really, really popular. That's our bestseller. Basically, the more appetizing the seed looks to you, the more appetizing it'll be for the birds. Those blends that have a lot of the yellow stuff in it, the cracked corn or the millet, the birds tend to throw that on the ground, and they go for the good stuff like the sunflower seed. So if you're finding that the birds are just they're going through seed like crazy, and you've got a blend like that, that's probably why. Keep an eye on them, because they might just be throwing that on the ground and going for the sunflower seed. So in those kind of instances, you're better off either getting a better blend or just going with straight black oil sunflower seed, because out of any one type of seed, sunflower is going to be what will bring in the biggest diversity. So you can do the sunflower, black oil sunflower that's in the shell, or you can do the sunflower hearts, which don't cause a mess, and that'll attract even more birds because it'll attract some of the smaller birds as well, like finches, more so than the black oil sunflower in the shell will. Another thing you can do is go with a shellless blend, which is what I do. For the most part, I feed some safflower, which has shells, but then I do mostly this woodpecker blend. So this is a really high-end blend, but it doesn't cause a mess, which I really like. So while I do have to do cleanup underneath the feeder, it's not as much as I normally would have to do when I had the sunflower seed in the shell. So the reason I switched to this ultimately is because, I didn't want my dog going through all the shells and trying to eat the shells. That was turning into a mess. So I switched to this woodpecker blend, and there's, again, just like the chickadee blend, how there's something for just about any kind of bird that'll come to a feeder in that. Same with this. It has a lot of the same ingredients, just without shells. It's got the peanuts, and it's got the shelled sunflower, which are really important for the birds. So it also has things like fruit in it, and it has pumpkin seeds. So it is a pretty good blend for a whole bunch of different birds. And that's our woodpecker blend. So that's a good blend that doesn't have any shells on it. And so another type of feeder you can always put out too. People love these this time of the year. If you're still getting those rose-breasted grosbeaks, a nice stray feeder with all this perching room, that will allow for any kind of birds to feed. So these are really popular. People will switch them up with what they put in them too throughout the year. Sometimes people will put a little cup of jelly in there along with their seeds, so you can get Orioles with your other birds. So you can't go wrong with a tray feeder. You just want to make sure it's somewhere, of course, that the squirrels can't get to it, because it is absolutely not squirrel proof. And then another type of feeder that everybody loves this time of the year is a Niger feeder, because the goldfinches are around and they are bright, bright yellow. They are here all year round, but right now is when they're at their brightest. So a lot of people will keep their Niger feeders stocked all year. And what makes it a Niger feeder is, you can maybe see it, it has a very tiny, tiny little hole. So Niger seed is really, really small, and that's why you need a special feeder for it. If you find that birds aren't coming to your Niger feeder, it could be the seed has gone bad. The seed will last for about 2 or 3 months, whereas sunflower seed and sunflower seed blends last a lot longer. But the Niger seed can go bad and dry out after 2 or 3 months. So if you're not getting bird activity coming to your Niger feeder, that's probably why. So you want to just dump it out and make sure it's clean, of course, and refill it with some fresh seed. That's the number one reason why they stop coming to feeders, is that the seed has gone bad. And this is what's called a bottoms up Finch feeder. And you'll notice that the perches are actually above the feeding ports, which is opposite of how they normally are. And the reason for this is that the finches will perch here, tip over upside down, and feed from the feeder. And the finches can do that, chickadees can do that, but the sparrows have a difficult time with that. So it's one way to keep sparrows out of your Niger feeder. And if you're looking to entice birds a little bit more with something that's just a little bit more than Niger alone, our Finch favorite blend has been increasingly popular, more and more and more popular with the birds. It's Niger seed, and then it's also ground up sunflower hearts. So it gives them a little bit something extra. I can't believe how much they go through of this compared to just Niger alone. I switched a couple of years ago, and it made a huge difference with the amount of birds that I've been getting in my backyard. So that can make a big impact. As far as other bird feeders go, we are in that season where we've got hummingbirds and we've got orioles, so that's really fun. This hummingbird feeder by Droll Yankee is one of their newest. So if you're familiar with the Droll Yankee company, we just saw a couple of their other feeders. Actually, both of those tube feeders we saw, besides the Squirrel Buster, are both Droll Yankee, and so is this. And this one's been popular because not only does it look nice, sometimes hummingbird feeders that are easy to take apart and clean can kind of look a little plain, but this one's really nice. It's got some pretty swirled glass. It is glass, it's not plastic. At least the reservoir here is glass, and they designed it with a flat top, which is nice because when you go to fill it, you can actually just set it on something. Sometimes they have a hook that sticks out, so you have to hold it while you fill it. This is nice because you can just set it down and fill it, and you don't have to use both your hands at the same time. And then it's easy to take apart. The base comes totally apart, and it allows for you to put the nectar tips, the nectar guard tips on it, which will help keep out bees and wasps. So if you open up your hummingbird feeder, you might see that there's little kind of protrusions there where the feeding ports are. And the reason for those are that you can put these little guards on them to keep the bees and wasps out. And they're just these little rubber, here they are, they're these little rubber tips. And you pull one off and you put it on the inside of the feeding port. And the idea with these, the hummingbird or even oriole, we do have one that's for the oriole feeders, can puncture right through it with their beak, but bees and wasps can't get through it with their tongue. So they only have short little tongues, and they can't penetrate that to get into the feeder. So the nectar guard tips, as we start getting into the season, usually when the orioles and hummingbirds start coming, there's not a huge amount of bees coming through, but we're starting to get to the point where there's more and more of them. I just saw a nice big yellow jacket on my Oriole feeder yesterday. So then some other things you can do to keep some pests, if you will, out of your feeder is use an ant moat. And I'm loving my ant moat. This, you fill it with water and you hang your feeder from it. And it'll make it so when the ants try to crawl down to get down to your feeder, they can't get around this water to get there. And as a kind of bonus, goldfinches and chickadees too absolutely love this as a little bird bath. So I've been refilling this almost every day. And I get little goldfinches that'll perch on the side of here and drink from it. So it's really cute. So it's kind of like a twofer. It's a little bird bath, plus it is an ant moat for your feeders. I never, for some reason, get goldfinches coming to my actual bird bath, but they're coming to this every day, all day. So it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun to see. If you happen to have an Oriole Fest feeder, one of these, which is a really good seller of ours, you can put bee guards on that too. It does come with bee guards if you buy a new one, but then we also sell the bee guards separate, so you can keep the bees from getting to the nectar. There's not too much you can do to keep them from coming to the jelly. If you've got your jelly out, like your birdberry jelly that the Orioles really like, especially as the season goes on and there's more and more bees and wasps out, it can be hard to keep them away. We do have fake bald-faced hornets nests that look like big paper lanterns. Those people have had some success with keeping bees and wasps away because bald-faced hornets are so territorial. If other bees and wasps see that there's a hive around, they tend to go elsewhere. So that can really help. But it can be tough as far as the season goes on. Other people will make a really sugary substance, way more sugary than their nectar. So they'll make something up that's maybe 1 part sugar to 1 part water. And they'll mix that together and put that further away from their feeders to kind of distract the bees and wasps and get them going somewhere else. That can sometimes help as well. And if you want to keep your nectar fresh longer, we do have the Nectar Defender. You add just a little bit of this to your nectar and it'll keep it fresh for more like a week or 10 days instead of, just 3 or 4 days. So that can really help as well. And if you had your Oriole feeder out over the weekend and it got washed away by that crazy rainstorm on Saturday, you might want to add a weather guard. These are really nice, especially for jelly feeders. You put this above your feeder and it just acts as a rain guard because it doesn't take long during a rainstorm for the jelly to get all washed out and then you have to refill it. So that can help prolong your jelly as well. Some of them come with a rain guard. I love this feeder because not only is it made of recycled materials, but it has 2 cups in it, so you can use one for jelly and you can use one for mealworms too. So right now, Orioles are still coming to feeders fairly often to get the jelly and to drink the nectar and go for the oranges. But soon we're going to start to see a drop off in that. And that happens every year once they are really sitting on their nests and they're incubating the eggs, and those eggs hatch. They start going for a lot of insect material because their young eat so many insects in order to grow and fledge and leave the nest. So it only takes a couple of weeks, which is amazing, for the birds to go from hatching out of the egg to leaving the nest totally. So the adults will feed them a whole bunch of insect protein, and you can provide that by putting out mealworms. So we do sell the live mealworms, which is what they prefer. We also have freeze-dried mealworms. And just as of yesterday, this is a very exciting announcement, we now have much larger quantities of freeze-dried mealworms than we used to have. So we had people asking for larger quantities. So now we do have much larger quantities of mealworms. So before we just had, 3 or 7 ounce containers. Now we have them. This is a 30-ounce container. We have 1 pound, we have 5 pounds, and we even have 11-pound bags if you want a lot of freeze-dried mealworms, and they don't go bad. So they're freeze-dried. You can keep them year over year if you don't go through them all in a season. It's totally fine. So now we have much larger quantities of mealworms in for your birds' dining pleasure. So you'll notice as we get along and we go on in the nesting season, once more of these birds have their young have fledged, or the young have hatched, the parents will be eating more and more insect material and bringing them more insect material, and even bringing the young to the feeders once they actually have left the nest. So we've got that going on too. And a couple other houses you might be interested in as we're getting into the months where they'll be more active. I've noticed and seen a couple of toads out there. So toads are kind of hopping around in gardens. We even have toad houses. So who doesn't want a toad house? We've got them in different styles and everything. But these are really fun. You can put them in your garden. And they all have this little kind of door, and they work well, especially if you can put them by a light that you might have on during the night. So some kind of light that will attract insects will usually attract toads as well. And they'll sit and come out of the house at night and go after the insects that are attracted to the light. So just a fun little thing you can put in your garden as a way to attract toads. And then another new thing, which I'm going to try this year because why not? I feel like everybody needs a tree frog house. These are pretty funny. So these are fairly new. So we haven't had much feedback about these yet. But I know some people get tree frogs, the gray tree frogs, going in their birdhouses. So especially in the summer, if you see something kind of that's not a bird hanging out of your birdhouse and it looks kind of grayish, or sometimes they can be green, take a closer look because it could be a gray tree frog. They do use birdhouses to stay in. So you just never know. And these are the same kind of thing. They're a much longer cavity here. But if you do put them by a porch light, that can really help to draw the tree frogs in. But I've been hearing the tree frogs calling as well. So they're out and active. And if you do happen to get them, some people get them at the side of their house, just clinging onto the side of the house by their porch lights as it is already. You can put out a little house to give them a little bit more protection as well. So we try to have houses for any kind of wildlife that might call this area home. So something a little different that you could put out to try. And as you guys are setting up your gardens, we get questions. We were talking about bee houses, but then there's also things to attract butterflies. Of course, the best thing you can do for butterflies is plant the kind of plants that they like. We've talked about butterfly gardening in the past, and we will more so coming up as the season goes on. But planting for butterflies, not only their nectar plants, but the host plants that the adults will lay their eggs on. That's really important. But you can put out a butterfly feeder as well, especially if you have quite a few butterflies already. The nectar goes inside this little reservoir. There's little spikes on the top where you can put rotting fruit. Butterflies will eat some interesting things. Are really a decomposer when it comes down to it. And so they'll eat things like rotting fruit or rotting bananas. You can put those on the top. And the main difference between this and, say, a hummingbird feeder or your Oriole feeder that has nectar is that the butterflies aren't going to dip their proboscis right into the nectar. Instead, there's these little wicks on it that will filter the nectar up to the top of the feeder and onto the wick. And then they'll just dab their proboscis onto those little wicks in order to feed. So something a little bit different. You can use the same kind of recipe you would use for your hummingbird nectar to make your butterfly nectar. So it would be 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. Or we now carry these little packets of butterfly nectar. And if you watched our hummingbird class where we had Josh Stay Sick from the Sweet Nectar Sweet Seed Company on, he was telling us about the differences between some of the nectars that they make. And this one also had some salts in it, which are good for the butterflies. So just some different things you can do. And some other things I thought I would talk about are, of course, with birds migrating in, window strikes can be a big thing, or even as the birds are leaving the nest, they're kind of unsure of where they are and their surroundings. So window strikes can be a big issue for birds, and you can put out window decals to keep that from happening. And these are our best sellers by a company called Window Alert. And they're such good sellers because you can kind of see it here from the packaging. To us, we put them out, you put them on the outside of your window, and to us, they almost look clear. So you can see that there's a little something there. There's kind of a little shade, but they reflect UV light. And so birds will see, because birds can see in the UV spectrum, they can see that there's something there on the window. And so that'll help keep you from having window strikes on your windows. So we have a whole bunch of these. We do have another brand too that you can even put on the inside of the window that'll help with the window strikes as well. And we have brushes to keep those feeders clean. Even though avian flu isn't an issue with songbirds, you definitely always want to keep your feeders clean anyway, because there's conjunctivitis birds can get here and there, and those are spread feeders if they're dirty. So you want to keep your feeders clean. We have bottle brushes to do that kind of thing. We of course have our bird bath brushes. We have these back in stock. So these are a really good scrub brush if you want to give your bird bath a really good deep cleaning. So these are really awesome, and they'll scrub away any kind of debris or what have you that gets in them, especially right now. There's all kinds of things falling from the trees, getting in bird baths. Saw the pollen coming out. Cottonwood trees are starting to have their little cotton. So the bird bath can be a very interesting collection of items at this moment. So you want to make sure to keep that clean, keep the water fresh. And we do have this bird bath protector as well, where you just add a little cap full to your water every time you change it out, and that'll just help break down some of that stuff. Maybe not the big pieces, but the little things that are causing that slime that can happen on your bird bath. This will help break that down. So the bird bath protector it's all natural enzymes. It's made specifically for bird baths, so it doesn't harm the birds in any way either. And then when you're out in the garden, you might start to have encounters with other types of creatures like mosquitoes and bees and whatnot. So we do have these little bracelets that help keep bugs away. They're called super bands, and just one of them will last 250 hours, which is pretty nice. And people have had good luck with these, especially if you put one on your wrist and one on the opposite ankle. That can help keep the bugs away. Something really small, but it does work. And if you happen to not be so lucky and get bit by a bug, we just brought these in, and these are pretty cool. If you watch Shark Tank, this company was on Shark Tank. It's called the Bug Bite thing. You might see their videos on social media. They've had a big campaign about how they work. It's almost like a little suction cup. So you put it on your skin. So say you get a mosquito bite, you put the bug bite thing, which is the name of it, on the bug bite, and then you pull this little contraption up, and it helps suck out some of whatever the bug has put into, whether it be venom from a stinger or bite from a mosquito. So it can help alleviate some of that pain and itching that you have from after a bug bite. So something completely random and strange, and it seems like it wouldn't work, but it has amazing reviews, and I've tried it, and unless I'm going crazy, I don't know, it seems like it does work. So this is something I just throw in my backpack to keep, because you never know when you're going to need it if you're out hiking. And then we've got the poison ivy soap, which is a must if you're doing gardening. This helps break down the oils if you happen to come in contact with poison ivy. So anything that has strong oils, this will help break it down. So poison ivy soap is kind of clutch. And then we do have some bug sprays. We do have some all-natural bug sprays, another good thing to keep in your bag. This Wildwood brand, it smells pretty good comparatively to some bug sprays. I like the smell of it. It almost smells like kind of cloves or something like that. And it's from a company all in New York. So we've got these. And then they also make one for dogs. So if you're out with your dogs and they're getting bit up by bugs, they do make one that's safe for pets. And you don't even have to apply it right to them. You can also get these little bandanas, or if your dog has, harness or a collar, you can just spray it right on that, and that'll help keep the bugs away. So we do have these little tiny bandanas, though, for dogs if you wanted to just use that for your dog spray. But if your dog was unlucky like mine over the weekend and I found a tick on it, which is always a scary thing, we do have these tick keys, and these are pretty clutch also to keep in your backpack. If you've ever had an experience with a tick, you've probably found that when they're burrowed in, it can be really hard to remove the tick and also remove its head, which is important. And this little tool here is designed specifically for that, to remove the tick's body and also their mouth parts. So once a tick's body is removed, their head can sometimes stay engulfed the person or the animal that they've latched onto, and they can still have the ability to transfer that spirochete that carries Lyme disease into the animal for a little bit longer. So having a tick key can really help. So this is one of those things, if you do a lot of hiking, this is a good one to have in your backpack or to throw on your keychain. So tick key is clutch. It helped my little doggy this weekend when he had a gross giant tick on the back of his neck, which was a fun discovery. And then finally, we've talked about different books. If you're into birds and birding, the Birds of New York book is awesome, especially if you're trying to decipher some. If you're new to the birding world and you're just starting to learn your birds, this is a great book to flip through. The pictures are awesome, and it's all organized by color, so that's really helpful too. So if you see a bird that is red, like if you're lucky, you might see this little fella, the scarlet tanager, that's out there now, that people are starting to see in here. It is all organized by color, so that will help determine what kind of bird you're seeing. And then I also mentioned on Saturday this book, the Crosley ID guide. This is big. It's not quite phone booth size, but there's a lot in here. But what I like about it is that it shows birds in all their different plumages, and also it shows them in their habitat where you can most expect to find them. So, it shows a kind of conglomeration. Let's see, those are canyon wrens. We don't want to see those, but say Carolina wrens. So here it shows Carolina wrens in their different plumages, when they're juvenile, when they're adult. And it also shows them in their habitats, so where you could most likely find them. So this is a really good book, especially as we go in the season and there's young birds out there, or if you are bold and you like to, identify fall warblers, that kind of thing. It shows all the different plumages, and then in the habitat where you'd most likely find them. So this is a really good book to add to your library if you're trying to up your birding game. It's not necessarily something you'd want to throw in your backpack because it's super heavy, but you can keep it in your car, or it's good to compare your photos to after you get home from hiking and that kind of thing. And then my favorite bug guide, if you guys are at all interested in insects, or you're wondering what the heck that thing is that just crawled across your garden as you're weeding, this Kaufman guide is awesome. So this is organized by group, by the insect group, but it has just about every bug you'll probably come in contact with in your yard. And the pictures are really good. It shows close-ups, but it also gives you a feeling for their actual size. And so if you're trying to identify things or learn a little bit more about the insect activity you have around you, it doesn't get better than this one. This is the best one I've ever seen, honestly. And I have all kinds of ridiculous field guides. So this Kaufman guide to insects is really, really good. So I thought I'd share that too, because there's definitely things starting to buzz around the area right now. So if you have any questions or comments, absolutely put them in the comments. Love to know what kind of things you guys are seeing. Looks like Bob is on. Bob says, good morning. Had a flock of about 30 cedar waxwings flying around the neighborhood. First time I've seen them in a flock. Also heard an eastern pewee. Heard both a yellow-billed and black-billed cuckoo early Monday morning. All right, so people are reporting cuckoos more so than we've heard in the past. Maybe year or two, there's been a good amount of cuckoo sightings and people hearing them. And last year, there was a good amount of yellow-billed cuckoo sightings, but now some people have been reporting more black-billed cuckoo as well. So that's really exciting. So we'll have to kind of keep our ears out and see if they stick around and if we hear them all summer. Stephanie says, good morning. My goldfinches are back after a week-long absence. I'm starting to wonder if my wind chimes might have impacted their visiting on the windy days we had over the past week. Oh, that's a good point. If your chimes are too close to your feeder, I wonder if the sound might keep them away, or if the light is hitting them, if they're silver. Birds in general don't like those shiny reflective objects. I wonder if the light hits them the right way. It might scare them away that way too, is a possibility. So that's an interesting observation. I wonder if that's the case. Dina's on. She says, good morning. Miguel, we talked about our squirrel-proof feeders. And of course, we have all kinds of different ones too. We've got larger ones. We've got smaller ones than that Squirrel Buster I showed. But that is one of our best sellers here. So Michelle is on. She says, I must share. We had a terrible squirrel problem until we bought PVC pipes and put it around a chain between two trees. The feeders are between sections of PVC. With that and baffles, they cannot get to our feeders anymore. We painted the PVC as well. Or we painted the PVC so it isn't noticeable. Okay. So yeah, there's all kinds of setups that people can put up to keep squirrels away. It sounds like they have baffles, and then they also have PVC from two trees that have a line on it. So the squirrels will go on the PVC and then they kind of tumble off of that because the PVC will cause them to roll. So sometimes you do have to get creative, and it sounds like Michelle got creative with her setup, but it is possible to keep squirrels out. Sometimes you just have to get creative. Ed says, Stephanie, our goldfinches are still on vacation somewhere. We typically have 10 to 15 goldfinch year round, but they do take off for a week or two at a time. Right now, we haven't seen a goldfinch for about 10 days. So interesting. A lot of people do experience this behavior where the goldfinches will be there consistently for weeks or months, and then suddenly they just disappear. So, not quite sure where they go, but that is just kind of in their nature for them to do that. And Laurel says, my goldfinches are loving the upside down Niger feeder. So I showed off this feeder called the bottoms up feeder, where the perches are above the feeding ports. So the finches will flip upside down to feed. And it sounds like Laurel is using that with some pretty good success. Stephanie says, I haven't had any Orioles yet, but enjoy the catbirds that frequent my birdberry jelly feeder. Yeah, I'm curious about how other people's experiences are going with Orioles. I had less this year than normal, but I never get that many. So that can be hard for me to judge, really. I just had one for a few days and then that was it. So I've got my feeder out still and I'm keeping it full and with the oranges and with the jelly. And we'll continue to do so throughout the summer because sometimes they do bring their young back. But I've been having more success with the catbirds myself. So I do like the catbird, and I have a house finch randomly eating the jelly too. So why not? More for them, I guess. But that being said, too, I'm not there to consistently watch the feeder. So they could be coming in. I just don't know it. Ed says our Oriole feeder is near the Hummer feeder that hangs from a red ant moat, and the female Oriole likes to stop by the moat occasionally for a drink after a jelly meal. So it sounds like Ed's seeing the same kind of behavior where birds will use this little ant moat as a bird bath. So that's fun. Yeah. These come in different colors too. It sounds like Ed has a red one. But yes, you can color coordinate with your feeders. We have them in red, we have them in orange, and we do have these clear ones. And we do have some that are in kind of fun, different shapes as well. Laurel says the robins have been piggish and are eating the jelly from the Oriole feeders. It's funny the different birds that people get coming to their Oriole feeders eating the jelly. So some are consistent birds you can kind of guess you might get, like a catbird is a good one because they consistently will eat the jelly. But robins are not one that we hear about often. Last year I had a cardinal eating the jelly as well, but not this year. So it's funny the different birds on different years that might eat the jelly. So Bob is having good luck with Orioles. He says, I must have at least 10 Orioles. A few pairs are nesting and others constantly fly around and chase each other. So Bob is having good luck with Orioles. So that is great to hear. That they're definitely still coming to feeders. We'll let you know when people start to say, they're not seeing as many, and then it might be time to switch to the mealworms, which we certainly have in stock right now. So if you're looking for freeze-dried or live mealworms, we absolutely do have those. So looks like that's everybody's comments and questions for the day. We'll be back on Saturday with another broadcast. And until then, enjoy your week, enjoy your birds, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.